Hi Nikki, Amy here to give you some feedback on your rough draft. I do apologize for not talking about your draft very much in the first discussion video I posted in my midweek update during the week that we did the peer review workshop discussion. But I did focus mainly on your paper actually in my final comments video here in the newsfeed. And the reason I bring that up is because I had some suggestions on your previous version of the draft that I think would actually be relevant here for what I'm going to talk about today. In some ways, I actually felt like the draft you sent me that was revised was kind of two steps forward, two steps back, because there were some places in the draft that you originally posted in the discussion that actually stated your claim or your thesis a little bit more directly than the version that I saw you had sent to me this week. So I would encourage you to please do go look back at that video, because particularly in terms of your introduction paragraph, I made a few pretty specific suggestions for ways that you could make your thesis flow a little bit better, because right now in the version that you've sent me, the revised version that you've sent me for this week, I actually had a hard time picking out your thesis at all. And actually what a lot of this draft looks like is kind of just a presentation of a bunch of information in the beginning that's not necessarily even tied to your argument, and then a somewhat pseudo thesis, and then after that not a whole lot of source information at all whatsoever until the very end. So I really think there were actually some strengths in your original version that could be applied to this draft here, because really the relationship that you need to focus on is between the thesis, the reasons, and the evidence that you're going to use to support your reasons. So really a lot of this information you're providing in the introduction isn't even necessary, and some of it feels kind of like fluff in terms of especially giving us the definitions and things like that. Remember your audience, you're writing for an academic audience of scientists. They don't need to know what the definition of euthanasia is and things like that. I think some of this stuff about the debate surrounding euthanasia is relevant, but really this other stuff in terms of dictionary definitions and that kind of thing is more feeling like padding your intro with information just to make it longer, when in fact you don't really want your introduction to be very long. You want to give us a little bit of background about the controversy surrounding this issue and then go straight into your actual thesis to present an outline of what your argument's going to be, because that is the most important thing in the essay as a whole. So let me just give you some technical stuff here before I get too far. In terms of formatting the essay, you do have a good title. You don't need the extra space there before the first paragraph, but this information up here in the top left-hand corner of the page, I'm going to go ahead and take the page number out here. This does not need to be in the running header. This should actually be just at the top of the first page. If you put it in the header, it's going to show up on every single page, and that's not really what you want, because that would take up a lot of space. So go ahead and take that out, and then you won't actually need a different first page, because all your pages are just going to have the page number at the top right, and then your last name, and that will be consistent. If you use the page number button there, it'll make sure the pages go consecutive 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on every single page. And then just make sure that the whole thing is Times New Roman 12-point font. I know that the computer tries to default you to Calibri or whatever it's called, but you do want to be consistent and go back and double check those things. This is a good quote to start with, but I would say one rule to be aware of is that you cannot just take a quote and stick it into your paper and have it constitute a complete sentence. Even if it was a complete sentence in the original source, you still need to have something in your own words, like an attributive tag or some kind of framing statement, so that it is worked into the flow of your own sentences. So, you know, maybe an attributive tag or something along those lines. And then along with that, it was an issue here and here. For your in-text citations, you need to be using whatever the very first word of the citation for that source in the work cited would be. So, you know, I'm not really sure if secondary is this person's last name or what. I would double check this. But if it was this source, for example, you would want to refer to it by the name Jackson. And down here for your medical dictionary source, you should be referring to it by partner, if that's actually the person's name, which I'm not totally sure if it is. And like here, Wikipedia isn't the author, it's the publisher. So Those are just a couple citations things. Make sure whatever word you use to cite in text is the same as the first word in the citation in the works cited at the end. And then for MLA, you don't use the dates, you use the page number. If it's a web source with no page numbers, you don't include that at all. And so this date is more of an APA style kind of thing and not something you'd use in MLA. Okay, so what's next? Let me see. Oh, don't copy paste. There were a lot of places throughout the paper where I could tell because there was a slight color shift in your font or a size shift or something like that. Like you can kind of see all of this is slightly grayer and this is blacker. That is how I know that you copied and pasted this. And even though it seems like that's just the same as typing it out yourself, copying pasting is actually plagiarizing, and your teachers can tell when you copy and paste, and it also looks kind of lazy, for lack of a better word. Sorry to say that. But I would say, just type it out yourself. You're going to be much more likely to work it into the flow of your discussion that way. And actually later here in the essay, it becomes kind of hard to tell what was copied and pasted and what wasn't, because I don't think once it shifted your font color, I don't think you ever switched it back. So really a lot of what you're writing here is actually in that lighter gray, especially getting later in the essay. So just watch out for that. Those are kind of alarm signals for your teachers, and you don't want to be using copy and paste ever, because that's not really doing your due diligence as a researcher to work the information into your own writing. Okay, so one of the things I already suggested is that your introduction goes on far too long. I would say cut out all of this stuff that has to do with just background information about the the definitions or just actually what it is, because your scientific audience is going to know that. Plus, again, anytime you provide a definition from a dictionary, it just kind of feels like you're padding the intro or padding the bibliography to try to get more sources in there than you really have. Here, I'm not sure why you have two citations. Just cite the source that this actual quote came from. And then two, you're making a lot of me and you statements that are not at all appropriate for an academic discussion. This kind of speculative scenario is way too emotional for an academic argument. All of your points should be based on the source evidence that you find in academic scholarly research. So I would again cut this out. This is not a scenario that I'm familiar with as your audience, and if I don't relate to that, it's going to make me feel really alienated. And also just words like us. What is the collective us that you're referring to here? Are you writing toward people who are lawmakers who have the authority to make these decisions? Are you writing to the general population to try to sway public opinion so that voters will act on this? It's unclear, and so in as much as you're kind of grouping you as a writer and me as your audience into this general us or we group here, that doesn't really make sense, because I don't identify with the potential audience of legislators who could change the law. Now, part of that is also an issue of the fact that you're not directly stating what your proposal is in your claim, and so if I knew what actually the proposal is that you're trying to call for, that would make it easier for me to know what audience you're writing to and whether or not I fit in with that audience. But regardless, this is just kind of a conventions thing. You don't want to use first person pronouns or second person you pronouns in any of your academic writing. But what you can see just by taking out those few sections, you can see that already this is a much more manageable paragraph. I've also combined it from two paragraphs into one. Anytime you go on for more than one paragraph before getting to your thesis, your audience is going to start to feel lost. They're going to be like, well, okay, well, here's another paragraph, but I don't even know what this is about yet. So you need to get to your thesis very close up front in the beginning before you kind of go on to anything else. Otherwise, it's going to feel like just a bunch of information, not necessarily information that ties to an actual argument. So you do a good job with surprising reversal. However, you're not really saying your points directly here, you're just saying them in the context of the counter arguments. So although many people believe that the right to die is morally, ethically, and legally wrong, insisting to believe there's always an alternative, the remainder of this text will fight in favor of having the choice to die. Some of this is kind of worded weird, in favor of having the choice. But what I was kind of getting at a minute ago is that you do say morally, legally, and ethically here, but that's only in the context of the counter arguments. You don't actually say what your reasons are to support your claim, and you don't actually even say exactly what your proposal is. So instead of referring to your text self-consciously like this, as in the remainder of this text, I would just say something like, in fact, having the choice to die is morally, legally, and ethically right. You could just say it's the right thing. Therefore, whatever your proposal is. And you need to be real specific about what that proposal is. It may be something like, the law needs to be changed, or federally we need to be more consistent with states like Oregon that have already done this, or something along those lines. We need to make a constitutional amendment. We need it to be upheld by some kind of Supreme Court judicial decision. Decide exactly on what level you think this should happen, who should enact it, and specifically what should be done, because the more specific your proposal is, the more likely it is to be enacted. And then I would say you don't even necessarily need to summarize these particular counter arguments here. You could just say object. You're going to develop it in a paragraph right after this anyway. Object to the right to die, insisting to believe, or you don't even need to say that, insisting there is always an alternative method. In fact, having the choice to die is morally, legally, and ethically right, therefore your proposal. Now then, once you have a overall claim that is really direct and focused like this, you can actually use parts of it to create your topic sentences for every paragraph. So for example, for this counter-argument paragraph, you don't want to start with a quote. You want the argument to be framed in your own language from your own point of view. So you don't want to give any of your sources the first or last word ever. So instead, give us a topic sentence that ties into the language of your thesis, and you could say, just copy and paste it even, so that you're echoing some of that language, and it'll really clue your reader in to the idea, oh yeah, I've heard this before, this is directly from the thesis, so I can follow along with this. And then again, here's another instance of a quote that needs to be framed in your own words somehow, and it's also copied and pasted. I can tell this is a correct in-text citation, however, so that's a good example to follow throughout the rest of the essay. I think the rest of this does a good job wallowing in the complexity of the counter-argument, but you need a lot more sources. And then instead of referring to yourself here at the end of the paragraph, it'd be a good idea to just go ahead and restate your thesis directly here at the end of the paragraph, and that'd be a nice way to transition from the counter-argument to your actual points. Then you have some topic sentences that talk about things like ethics and the legal aspects. If morals is going to be one of your points, it does need to have a paragraph of its own with its own topic sentence. So I would start that paragraph something like this. And you do need to connect to your proposal as you introduce every single paragraph, whatever that may be, and then you'll use your proposal to wrap up every single paragraph as well. So something like, therefore, let's see, for your morality paragraph, you might have some evidence, etc., 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 and then say, therefore, because it is morally right, whatever your proposal is. The right to die should be made legal on a federal level or something. So again, you can see that here. This is definitely a paragraph about ethics. So I would say, yet another reason why this proposal should be enacted is because of it is the right thing to do ethically. And then you can go on with everything you're saying, but you still need to say this topic sentence first. And then at the end of the paragraph, again, therefore, because it is ethical to do so, the right to die should be made legal on a federal level. or whatever your proposal is. And then you'll do the same thing in your legal paragraph, connect to the proposal at the beginning and end. And then again, all of these paragraphs need to have evidence in the middle. You do have information here, but you're not citing any of it, and you're mostly using yourself as a source. So that's not going to be enough to actually convince your reader. And then I get the sense that this is your proposal paragraph, but again, you're not saying exactly what needs to be done. So I'll go ahead and send you these comments in an email, but send me one back if you have further questions. Thank you.